afternoon, everybody. This is our first webinar of the new year, and we have today with us Barry Flink. And Barry is the EVP and co-founder of Flex HR LLC. And what they are is they're a human consulting firm, human capital consulting firm. Barry's an executive with the company. He's been in several different industries. He's been in real estate. He's been in the hospitality industry for over 30 years as an executive. So what we're going to talk about today is careers and jobs. And this is something I think that will resonate with a lot of people, especially, unfortunately, in the times that we live in now with the pandemic. It gives people an opportunity to really know what they can do. These people that unfortunately have been downsized or looking for new opportunities. Barry's going to tell us all about careers and jobs. So Barry, thanks for coming on today. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for attending. This is going to be fun for me because actually I've never done a webinar before, but I'm so excited about having the chance to do so. Nothing else, wave at me occasionally so I know you're out there, because I'm also used to talking to folks and I miss you guys already. So we are going to be talking today about, first of all, what is the difference in a career and a job? People will give you different answers, but it's really very simple. A job is one way to have a career, and that's all a job is. However, if the job doesn't have a fulfillment for you, if it isn't something that's fun, that you look forward to going to, go find another job. And that's why we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So we're in a different world now. Some things I'll be sharing with you have applied, may not apply, because let's face it, none of us really know where the world's going to go at this point. We just know it's going to go. I'll start with, there is a fallacy that has happened because of overuse. For the last several years, we've all talked about postings, job boards, etc. Don't abandon it, but don't consider it the only way. It isn't. And more of the recipients, and I'll give you an example. As an HR executive, I get stuff like that constantly. I don't have the time or the interest to read through 2,000 postings. So in any type of a search, what you want to do is don't follow the pack, lead it. Try something different. I'm an example myself, because like I said, never done this before. And it's nice to at least have 4 of you to look at, and maybe some more. So that being the case, let's think for a second. And I'm sure all of you have ideas about other ways to do it. And my job, not my career at the moment, is to share with you some of my thoughts on other ways that you can do it. First of all, there is a fallacy in considering job posting. Does it work? Yeah, it used to work. Does it work now? Maybe you guys are also in leadership positions and think about how you look at possible new associates. So a suggestion is, 1, don't go to job fairs. Same thing, a lot of distraction, a lot of noise, because everybody else there is hitting on the prospective employers. Instead, go to events that are not job fairs, but where possible employers might be. Then you get to start by building a relationship, not looking for a job. All of us know that we don't like to be hit on, and that's really what happens at a job fair. So try something different. Go to an event. This is even a good example, even though you guys aren't talking to one another. In a normal environment, you might. And again, that's how you could meet someone. Maybe Rob says something while he's talking to David and makes an impression on David, and who knows, maybe later it's an introduction that might lead to a job. And again, job might lead to a career. One of the things that I use as a technique, and others do, would be another suggestion. Again, don't always look like you're looking for a job. Get caught in the act of doing your job and being yourself. I mean, let's face it, interviews are a show. You put on a coat and tie or a nice dress and you groom yourself beautifully. It's fine, but it's a show. None of us are hiring actors. We want to hire the real person. That goes down to everything in terms of your appearance. One of the suggestions I always make, we used to live in a world where everybody put on a suit or a nice dress to go for an interview. That worked in the past, doesn't work as much anymore. There's an old adage, dress for the job you want, not the job that you have. So how do you do that in this type of scenario? Very simply, if you can, and this is part of your research, find out how associates that work in the company dress the same way. Come in again, putting in the mind of someone who will hire you, do you look like you fit in? For some of us, that's an adjustment. I'm used to wearing suits. Our son will tell you he didn't even know till he was 20 that dad had anything but suits. That's not the world today. So we all have to change. And we'll talk a little bit later about how many different ways and things we may have to do. Another fallacy for today, and this specifically and more pertinent to people that are seeing high-level jobs. We've all lived with using resumes. And a lot of people that do the hiring, using myself as an example, read them and toss them. Now, why would somebody do that? Because again, it's simply marketing. That's what it is, a marketing tool. And again, people do not like to be sold. People like to buy. So you make it a little bit warmer with a biography. If I were looking for another position now, I did in the past, never used a resume, found didn't really make a difference to a lot of people. And I'm not saying some don't, many still do. But if you're looking for a higher level job, use a resume and use a biography. Or try using just a biography. It's remarkable how things like that work. I think of a case in my own career where an article had been written about me and a wine collection I have. I was in Minneapolis changing planes, and this lady walked over to me and said, "You're the bottle guy." I looked up and said, "I don't know what you're talking about." She said, I read that article about you and your bottle collection. So we talked for a minute, sat down, had a nice conversation. She flew on to Chicago, I flew home, and a month later I had a new client. Worked the same way, looking for a job. It's a different way. Again, be different. Don't do it the way everybody else does it. The old expression, and I use old expressions all the time, is think out of the box. And that clearly applies in the job search environment today. We all see on TV where somebody does something crazy. I remember one not too long ago where a guy walked down the street and he simply had on one of these large signs you can see on both sides. And it simply said, "I need a job, hire me." And it worked. The guy landed a job in 2 weeks flat. No resume, no biography, out of the box. It can work. What do you think the future holds for us with the COVID-19 virus? First of all, we're still going to have to change our approaches to job search. One thing, and at least 4 out of the 4 people watching will laugh at that I'm the one saying this, we have to embrace technology. Things are going to be done differently, and that includes how you look for a job, how you find one. And like I said earlier, jobs are one thing, career is something else. A job is a step to a career, and it's a building block. But again, when you're thinking about a job, important things are, will you like it? Will you really have a reason for doing it besides just for yourself? Because again, people notice these things. You go into a job and it demonstrates to those around you that you're doing it because you wish to help them. selling power. That's very much selling power. People like to hire people that they know will have a passion, not only for what they do, but for what the company does. So one of the key things in getting a job or a career is the word passion. Always keep that in your mind when you're talking to anyone related to a job, or I think it works pretty well in life. My wife will tell you I'm too passionate. Rob will probably just walk away because he's had to put up with me for a while as well.
Hey, Barry, I got a quick question for you that kind of came
Yeah,
up.
certainly.
Um, is there a difference when you're applying for a remote job versus an in-person job, especially now with the advent of, people working remote with Zoom and everything else?
Absolutely. Great question. And again, this is fitting with how we have to do things differently. And again, you have to adapt to the scenario. If you're doing it by remote, techniques that would work in person won't work. Examples, dress, because you don't see that much in a screen like we're all seeing. So you have to think in terms of what works when you're in that environment. All of us use Zoom and so forth, and we all think about different things. Like a good example is I'm now looking at my son, and the way he has positioned himself says a lot of things to me. And I look at Suki, and again, she and I just met today, guys, and I've learned a lot about her just by observing her. So think about these things when you're looking for a job by remote, particularly if the job is going to be one, and it may be in these days, where you'll be operating remotely. In person, much of what I've already said still applies, and we're still going to see a scenario many times where you'll have a remote interview and then you may have an in-person one. Because again, looking from the standpoint of the person at the other end, it's very efficient and can be very quick to do it, as I call it, on TV. A little bit different when you do it in person. Rob, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I have a quick little follow-up on that too, is as far as you mentioned before about the way people dress, and you kind of need to adapt to the environment of what that job is. So is there a difference then if I'm applying for a particular job, whether I'm doing it via online like Zoom here, or whether I'm doing it in person? Am I changing the way I dress based on that?
Could be possible, but my gut feeling is no. In either case, you want to dress for the job you want. Same thing. Secondly, you want to try to dress again in either scenario for what other folks are wearing at work. A good example, and I'm looking at now, David, you, and me, and all three of us are dressed pretty much the same way, casual. Sheila, I can't see what she's wearing, but I'm sure it's the same idea. And Suki is giving us a very consistent look, but again, a little more casual. Even for me, and those of you that know me well, David, like I said, will tell you, dressed like this, I wasn't doing this 5 years ago. I was still wear a suit anytime, everywhere you go. And I found wearing a suit when going to the bathroom was terribly inconvenient. How's that follow up? Got a third one?
No, let's keep going with the topics. Well, I'm sure we'll have some more as people have questions. Please feel free to put in the chat box, and I'll ask them as we come along or at the end when Barry's completed.
Right. Keep social responsibility in mind. And this again applies career or job, because companies are finally becoming much more sensitive to this. And if you drop in a comment or two in the course of your discussion, and again, either way, TV or in person, demonstrating, particularly if you know the social responsibilities the company embraces. And again, that's where websites are useful. If I were looking for a job now, and I think most people know it, but again, it bears repeating, look at the website of the company before you go. That gives you a chance in some cases to see how people dress, to learn what matters to the company, because companies not only want to sell you on what they have, they also want to sell you on who they are. And another thing that comes to mind, which I think goes without saying, attitude is the first thing you sell when you come in the door. Obviously, we all know have a positive attitude, but one of the things to think about, and applies again in either case, is think about the fact you're not going in to get a job. You're going in to think about and communicate how you can add value, what you would like to do to help the company, but think in terms of it as they have an opportunity too. That's part of how you exhibit confidence. Know who you are, what you are, and make sure that the company sees that. Very, very important. You know, one of the things that Rob and I both do, which is plays into this very well, we've recently hired a number of people, and one of the things we asked them to do was to write us a short letter telling us what they like to do. Expect that. Rob and I are not the only people doing this. Others are as well. And that goes right down to where the world is now also, that the day of money being the main inducer may not be anymore. Many people, particularly younger people, are looking for fulfillment, the opportunity to do something meaningful, and the opportunity to care about matters that are not in the main line of the job, such as protecting the environment, embracing diversity. So all of these are good things to keep in the back of your mind, and they're not the things in the past we all traditionally thought about. Now, another good example, the environment. 10 years ago, who went in for an interview thinking about, gee, I need to think a little bit about how we can reduce pollution? And the company I'm talking to has nothing to do with that. But again, that's demonstrating who you are and that you care. And that you care is a quality that appeals to a lot of employers. And that's really the thoughts I have for now. And I would be happy, in fact, excited to have an opportunity to ask some of your questions.
I got another one here, Barry, about you referred to the biography versus a resume, or kind of doing the coordination. Why don't you share with everyone, what would a biography entail? How long should it be? Is there a picture involved? Is it a couple paragraphs? Kind of give us what would be the ideal biography people would use.
Okay. First and foremost, try not to ever go over one page. It seems like a lot of people, as soon as they have to start turning pages, they also start starting fires with the papers. So keep it, the old KISS principle. Biography should not be half a page either. Try to fill up at least 3/4 of the page, or adjust your font so that it appears to be 3/4 of a page. Also, be careful about using fine print. This is print that's pretty readable. You won't want to make a biography or a resume this big, but some people, in an effort to get everything across, end up writing something that's so dense, so much ink on it, that people can't even or won't even take the time to read it. So spacing, and white space in particular, is, believe it or not, just as important as the stuff that's printed on the page. You actually had a two-part question, and I think I missed the second part. What was it?
I think you hit it. Another question that's come across is, people are asking, are there keywords or phrases that you should use when you're interviewing for a job?
Now, first and foremost, avoid saying anything negative. If there is a comment that needs to be made, and sometimes there is, think in terms of saying something I like better, or something I've seen might work better. Again, if you have something negative to say it positively. And if you think, one of the things that I don't even tend to do as much as I should is, there is no rule that says 3 seconds after the question is asked, you must answer it. Nope. take a little time internally, take a breath of air, but think before you speak.
Okay, great. This is an age-old thing that comes across, and much you might have kind of covered it, but I'll ask it again. When people are looking for a job, a lot of times, and this would appeal to our younger listeners, but how do you get a job if you haven't had a job? And we're finding that a lot of these people, especially coming out of college right now, are facing that dilemma that they don't know what to do. They're looking for that help.
Excellent question. Fairly easy answer. Do things that are like a job, but you're not getting paid for them. We have an individual in one of the companies that I help manage that has never had a job, and she's working to get experience. So if you don't have a job, you can gain saleable experience by doing something that isn't a job. That would be my answer. It's not having work experience, but having experience. People hire, or some people do, because of what you've done and don't really care if you got paid to do it or not. It's what you know how to do, not how you learned how to do it.
Great. Okay. One of the things that we're trying to do as a company is kind of bringing the connections and the networking and all that. How important do you see networking as a way for people to get a job? That's the first, or a career. That's the first question. And then, how would you recommend going about doing it?
Okay. People tend to like people and then make decisions about them. So excuse me, networking has been replaced by a new term that I hear a lot, netting. I guess that implies catching. But the reality of it is where you go. Don't again think inside the box. Think of places you can go. Is networking critical? Yes. How people do it, and that's another kind of going back to why I said don't go to job fairs. Events that are networking events, and we all go to them. I don't look to hire anyone at a networking event because usually everybody's selling themselves. So going to other things is a form of networking. You run into someone maybe you've never met, you strike up a conversation with them, and then something happens. So network without networking would be my answer.
Okay. Okay. Another question here: when talking about what we like to do you recommend that we keep it in line with what we found out about the company in our research?
Not always. I would say certainly it's important to make a few points that do demonstrate that. But again, most of us that hire people today look for two things: what's in their heart and what's in their head, which means there may be something that you, in fact, really enjoy, really matters, that you'd really like to do, and you didn't see anything in your research on the company to suggest it'd be relevant. Things may be relevant to a company they didn't communicate. So if it's something that matters to you, do it. What's the downside? Don't dominate with that, but throwing a few of them in, sure.
Okay, great. Here's another one. When people, back to the biography again, and you're looking at the picture, what's the best kind of picture to use? I mean, I know like typically look at headshots, or do you look at maybe something more in maybe somebody in a social setting? Because you talked about being able to read kind of characters or people's personality by looking at them. Would that help, or should it be a headshot, or maybe the other one, or either both?
That's another good question. I don't know that there is one accurate answer. A lot of it depends on where you look your best. Some people look their best in a very formal headshot manner. Some, like all of us participating right now, in a casual manner. Sometimes you have to use the one that fits the situation. There is, in my judgment, no one answer to this question. Different situations, either could be appropriate.
Great. What is the best way to answer that very common question? What are your flaws?
Very simple answer. Disclose them. Transparency, because the person watching you will probably have some clues to your flaws by your behavior. Commenting on them is a healthy thing to do. We all have flaws. Anybody that's hiring someone expects to have flaws. So yeah, go right ahead and talk. I wouldn't, make it a dominant thing. I can sit down and rattle off for 2 hours all the things that are flaws for me. Don't think it's going to make a difference in my life, but sometimes disclosing a few, one that is already apparent. Do I talk too much? I happily will admit it, because even in an interview, I would have a tendency to talk too much. That's what's fun about this. I get to talk.
There you go. You get to be the lead here. So, yeah, it's funny. We're talking about the flaws on that question. I was watching a TV show the other night, and this guy was interviewing for a job, and he was kind of killing it. And then he got into there was a question he left off about his past history. And so when the question came, like this guy, the interviewer was, all nice to him and kind of joking around, but then the guy just got too much into his background, which ended up getting him out of that job, or not getting the job.
Sometimes people oversell. That may be a case you're talking about. Sometimes even little human interest stories can make a difference. And I'm going to give you a little story about me and how it makes a difference. About 7 years ago, no, it's about 12 years ago, I hired a lady who was a retired physics teacher to work at Flex HR. She had never worked a day of her life in our field. Nobody else would give her a chance. I didn't really care about what she had done or not done. You can train people to do things. Can you fix a person's head or their heart? Not really. So I hired her. Little did I know, 8 years later, this woman would save my life by donating her kidney. And that's why I'm saying employers look for these things. They want to know who you are. Knowing what you want is also important to express, but a lot of employers, I'm not unique, look at who a person is, not what they've done. Yeah, they need to know what they've done, but knowing what they will do is heavily dependent on these two factors. Show your heart and demonstrate your head.
Great. Here's another one that's come up is you recommended organizing, your resume. How do you, by years and jobs we've been in, or by skills? What's more pertinent?
Okay. There's no, again, one right answer to that, but what a lot of people do is they put up at the top what they want. The person that is considering you knows what you want, you wouldn't be there. So instead, always try to keep it simple. The top just maybe a 1 or 2 sentence of what you've done in terms of skill sets. And then how you go through the bottom, again, depends on what sells you best. If you've had a lot of jobs, that can be good and it can be bad. Either way, I would minimize that part. If you've got a bunch of jobs, talk a lot about your most recent one. And in some cases, the further down your career you go, the less you say. One of the things that always guides me well is think about what happens when you go to a restaurant. You look at a menu. Same thing can be true in this case. Your resume may be exactly that, a menu. And frankly, let the interviewer decide what they want to know about. We all try to think, even I'm doing it now. I'm trying to think about what you want to hear, not what I want to say. Same thing is true in the resume. And that's why when you can, and a lot of people do this and do it very well now, is not only look at the company, see what you can figure out by research about the person that's going to interview you, what he or she likes, what they've done, read their biography. All that, again, helps you know what to say. Again, say to him or her what they'll be interested in hearing about, not what you want to sell, meaning yourself. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah. Yep. this is something, and this might be flipping on like more on the executive side, but in the environment that we're in today, and we're talking about remote, and a lot of companies going remote. Uh, as an executive, especially in your space in HR, um, what would some of the recommendations that you might make on the employer side? I mean, with these people coming in and working remote.
That's a good question. And that is one I don't really have an answer to, which again, it's transparency. I think what we have to consider in that type situation is again, what works for you may not work for me. This actually could be a summary of everything I'd say, which would come down to two words: be yourself. Do what feels right for you, because when we get out of our core competencies, when we get out of what we have passion about, it isn't likely to be as successful as sticking to those two things. Know what you can do well, do it. What you can't do well, get other people to do it. That's why Sheila has volunteered to be my technical advisor.
That's great. Are there any other questions out there? I know we've had a lot of good questions, and you've enlightened us, Barry, which is very much appreciated. Just kind of give it another minute here. Yeah, I think that kind of does wraps up as far as that goes. Wait, here comes one other one. This is a good question. How should people follow up with a job interview? And actually, this is something that I've heard a lot of people. Well, actually, let's answer that. And I got one other thought that came across based on that.
Okay. A lot of people over follow up. I've had situations where once a week I get a, kind of a where do I stand type thing. So again, sometimes less is more. I would not do any follow up for at least 2 weeks as a minimum. And then a short letter that in any way possible doesn't say I'm following up. Sometimes, and this wouldn't necessarily work in all situations, you might just make a phone call or a text message or an email. Says, I was thinking about the opportunity I had to meet you, and having not heard from you, I was just hoping you were okay. I'd love to hear back from you, just letting me know you're okay. That's simple.
Okay,
And
great.
again, maybe one more time, again, 2 weeks out, and that's it. I wouldn't do any more follow-up, because for many people, then it starts becoming an annoyance. And then any chance you had probably goes away.
Okay, and
Thank
then
you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, so just and even taking the head out, so this was like where you interviewed, but another complaint I've had from people, maybe you can recommend to them. Same thing on the follow up is that back to the job boards or things like that. I mean, people wherever it might be that somebody sees that there's a job posting and they send in a resume or maybe the biography, maybe that's the tilting factor here. But how do you follow up on that? Because a lot of people say, well, I've sent it out there and I haven't heard anything back. But yeah, I don't want to I would rather, I'm the type of person I want to know that, if they don't like me, they don't like the resume, that's fine. Just tell me. But there's a lot of people out there, especially now, that are trying to get these jobs and they never hear anything.
You may not like the answer. My answer is just forget it. Again, it's so much overload right now. If someone is interested in you, they'll let you know. And if they're not, they don't. You got your answer by the fact they didn't respond. You post something, you're along with 2,000 others. And again, as an employer, I'm not going to read 2,000. I'll look at the ones that are interesting. Those that don't. Sending me a letter wanting to follow up will end up generally in the nearest trash can. Don't have time for it. We live in a world where we all have to so carefully budget our time, because again, the static we're getting, so much interference, you have to filter. So job posting, send it and then forget it. Go on to the next thing. If there's something there, you'll hear about it.
Okay, great. Well, this has definitely been a great topic, and we really appreciate all your time today, Barry.
It's been a pleasure. And again, if anyone that's listening should have any more questions, you can certainly contact me through Rob, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. However, don't follow up. If I don't answer it, don't send me a note 2
Yeah.
weeks later,
Well,
please.
maybe what we
Please.
can do too is get a outline of that we can share with people. And just to kind of wrap it up here, you know, at Alumni Direct, you can find us at myalumnidirect.com. You can follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn. And the one thing that really resonated with me with this topic is something that we're trying to do as we move forward is to have, you know, I mentioned to Barry about just the whole networking or netting, as he put it now. I think it's really important for people to reach out to people that you have a like interest with, their commonality. And that's what we're trying to accomplish with community centers, where people, if you look at fellow alumni, or, you know, the Greek organizations are always a great example of this, of fraternities and sororities where they help each other out when they get out of school. So definitely look for ways to find people, especially in that alumni space, that are willing to help. I mean, that's something that's really important to me, is helping other people. When I find, in my case, University of Delaware alumni, I'm first one in line to see what I can do to help out. So everybody keep that in mind. And we're going to have more webinars like this. We're just, as I mentioned, it's all about value and learning and things that we could do that will really help everybody out. So thank you everybody so much.
Hey,
And,
Rob, I have a question.
oh, sure, George, go ahead.
Could you give us an update on Alumni Direct and what your next steps are as far as the website? And
Sure. Yeah, it's the site is active now, as I mentioned, myalumnidirect.com, and we encourage people to go out there and utilize it. You know, start getting friends and family members into these community centers and just interact. I mean, there's a place to, you know, whether it's doing different events, whether it's posting jobs, whether it's advertising your businesses. We want to give everybody that opportunity. So again, I'm going to end it with that. But great question. Thanks, George, for the extra pub there, and we appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thanks again.
Yep. Take care, everybody. Thank you.